Welcome back. We are a little over a day away from current UAW contracts expiring with the big three. At this hour, the union continues to negotiate with Ford, GM, and Stellantis to try to hammer out new deals and hopefully avoid a strike.
UAW President Shawn Fain has said he will not be extending the deadline beyond tomorrow night at 11:59. And recent reports suggest that while all three companies could be strike targets, the union may try a different tactic than it has in the past.
Well, joining us now for more insight is MSU Professor of Supply Chain Management, Jason Miller. We appreciate you being here with us tonight.
Thank you for having me on.
The union reportedly has a strategic plan in place to strike at small plants across the big three. Now, can you explain to us what's the point as opposed to, let's say, one big walkout?
Yeah, so this gets to what we often in supply chain call the golden screw problem. And that is, if you're missing just one or two critical components, you can't move forward with overall production. And so, for example, if you would strike at an engine plant, that's going to shut down assembly at the motor vehicle plant, but will also cascade upstream to affect parts suppliers. So you don't need a very large walkout to still have a disruptive event.
So is the union's goal with this more surgical strategy, is it more to lessen the blow to the economy or even the big three, or is it to conserve the strike fund that is, it's finite?
So likely part of this is to conserve the strike fund and also not risk, about 150,000 folks going on strike, which would very quickly diminish those funds. And also this is just showing resolve to move forward with the strike. We haven't seen something like this since 2019 with GM.
So in a sense, we could see some smaller plants where workers walk off the job and other workers perhaps still working at other plants. Is that correct? And then maybe if this goes on for an extended period of time, if they do indeed strike, maybe they would flip-flop so they don't blow through that $500 per week stipend?
That could be possible. It would take a lot of strategy to do that, though, just given how interconnected the motor vehicle and parts sector is that you may have unintended consequences of not realizing that one plant is feeding into another plant. And so while I understand the purpose of this tactic, this is such an interconnected network, it may not quite work that effectively to target bits and pieces.
So based on your expertise, what is your hunch here? Does the potential of a more surgical tactic like this, does that mean we're anticipating a longer strike potentially?
I don't think so in comparison to where we were, let's say, in 2019 when we had about a 6-week strike. I think right now there has been some progress in negotiations. And so my sense is that this more strategic approach may be tried to use to get the automakers to come to the table with a deal that's more palpable to the UAW. In that way, we avoid what will be a strike that's essentially 3 times the magnitude of the 2019 strike, which saw about 12,000 people in motor vehicle parts production get laid off in Michigan, and 11,000 people get laid off as they were on strike in actual assembly operations.
As an expert in supply chain management, how much would it affect the supply chain here for the consumer?
So from a consumer standpoint, dealer inventories on average are still about 14% below where they were before COVID. That differs across the big three. Stellantis' dealerships have a little bit more inventory right now relative to where their sales are in comparison to Ford and GM. We've finally seen prices settle in at about 30% higher than where they were before COVID. So we've had this tremendous run up in vehicle prices, new and used. If we'd have a prolonged strike that would affect all big three automakers, almost assuredly those used vehicle prices would increase, because even with consumers constrained right now, even with higher interest rates, we're seeing motor vehicle sales, especially for light trucks and SUVs, are hovering around 2019 levels, which were essentially an all-time high prior to COVID.
And what if it does become an extended strike? What do you see happening to the auto industry in the event?
So if we have an extended strike, we'll certainly have dealer inventories getting depleted substantially. There will likely be demand destruction for the big three as consumers turn to the other automakers who do not have the unionized presence and hence will not be disrupted. But there'll also be a lot of cascading effects over into industries such as trucking. Motor vehicle plants generate a lot of freight. And so if you take that output out of the system, that's going to cost many truck drivers their jobs. It's going to cost folks in warehousing their jobs. It'll affect chemical plants because there's less need for paint. There's less need for plastic resins that go into the plastic products that go into cars. And so in the case of a prolonged strike, this will cascade to affect multiple other industries in Michigan, not just motor vehicles or the parts manufacturers.
Professor Jason Miller of Michigan State University, we appreciate you joining us tonight as we continue to discuss a possible strike with the UAW and the Big Three.
Thank you for having me.